Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In Gaza, Israeli attacks have killed at least 68 Palestinians and wounded 77 others over the past 24 hours. An attack just hours ago on displaced people in Khan Yunis killed or injured more than a dozen people, mostly women and children. Another attack on Rafah killed at least 7 Palestinians. The mother of Gaza's first confirmed polio patient, Abdulrahman Abul-Jidyan, a nearly one-year-old boy who is now paralyzed, is speaking out and pleading for medical treatment. This is Naveen Abul-Jidyan.
I was shocked that my son got this disease amidst the war and the closure of border crossings. Under these conditions and lack of medicine for him, it's a shock. Would he remain like this? For how long? Is there a treatment for him? Is there someone to treat him? I don't know what to do. I took him to the hospital. They told me that my son has polio and they cannot treat him. They cannot do anything for him. He is my only baby boy. It's his right to travel and be treated. It's his right to walk, run and move like before. It's his right to get the proper treatment, travel, get out and get his chance in life.
The World Food Program has suspended all staff movement across Gaza after Israeli soldiers opened fire on one of its vehicles, hitting it 10 times. The vehicle was clearly marked as belonging to the United Nations and was part of a convoy that the UN had coordinated with the Israeli military. This is UN spokesperson Stevan Dujarric.
I think after this conflict is over, and we hope it's over much sooner than later. There will need to be accountability. There will be boards of inquiry to look at the destruction of UN property, the death of UN personnel, notably our security colleague.
The UN Security Council is meeting today to discuss the humanitarian crisis and the delivery of aid in Gaza. Israel's continuing its largest raids on the occupied West Bank in decades. Overnight, the Palestinian death toll rose to at least 18 as Israeli forces pushed into Jenin, Tulkarem, and the Farah refugee camp near Tubas with armored vehicles, bulldozers, fighter jets, and drones. More than 30 people have been injured since Israel launched the raids Wednesday. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad confirmed the commander of its armed wing was killed in the Nur Shams camp. We'll go to guests in Gaza and Jenin for more after headlines. The European Union's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, warned that Israel's incursion in the West Bank must not be, quote, the premise of a war extension from Gaza, unquote, amidst fears Israel's preparing to annihilate another Palestinian territory. Borrell said he asked European Union members about possible sanctions on Israeli ministers who've called for the destruction of the West Bank and the Palestinian people.
Some Israeli ministers has been launching hate messages, unacceptable hate messages against the Palestinians, and proposing things that goes clearly against international law and is an incitation to commit war crimes.
Ireland accused Israel of deliberately targeting civilians and said it supported EU sanctions. This comes after Israel's Foreign Minister, Israel Katz, wrote of the West Bank invasion, quote, "We need to deal with the threat exactly as we deal with terror infrastructure in Gaza. This is a war for everything, and we must win it." Meanwhile, Egypt has rejected any Israeli presence along its border with Gaza, including the Rafah border crossing and the Philadelphia corridor. Israel's military presence in the Philadelphia corridor has become a point of contention in ceasefire talks, which Cairo has been hosting. In other related news, Namibia has blocked a vessel suspected of carrying explosive weapons to Israel from docking at its ports. Rights groups had warned Namibian officials that allowing the vessel to dock could implicate Namibia in potential human rights violations. The Biden administration's rebuffed the prospect of resuming nuclear talks with Iran after Tehran expressed its willingness to return to the negotiating table. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, gave Iran's new president, the reformist Masoud Pezeshkian, the okay on Tuesday to relaunch talks with Washington. But a U.S. State Department spokesperson told reporters shortly after the news, quote, "We are far away from anything like that right now," unquote. A Hong Kong court has convicted 2 editors of a pro-democracy newspaper of sedition. The landmark verdict against journalists with The Stand newspaper was swiftly blasted by press freedom groups. Reporters Without Borders called on Hong Kong authorities to, quote, stop its nefarious campaign against press freedom, unquote. The Stand was one of the last pro-democracy publications in Hong Kong before it was raided by police and forced to shut down in 2021 amidst Beijing's mounting crackdown on Hong Kong's autonomy. In Beijing, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan met with Chinese President Xi Jinping today, capping off a rare 3 days of talks between a Biden administration official and Chinese leaders. The U.S. and China have agreed to hold more military talks and said a call between President Biden and Xi Jinping will be planned in the coming weeks. A top Chinese military officer also asked Jake Sullivan during a meeting to end U.S. quote-unquote collusion with Taiwan, over which China claims sovereignty. Honduras has vowed to end its extradition treaty with the United States after the U.S. ambassador denounced Honduran officials and implied they were working with drug traffickers. The U.S. accusation came after Honduran Defense Minister José Manuel Zelaya met with his Venezuelan counterpart, Vladimir Petrino, who was indicted by the U.S. on drug trafficking charges in 2020. This is Honduran Foreign Minister Enrique Reina.
International relations must be based in mutual respect, in dialogue, and not meddling and trying to impose policies, no matter the other state's positions, based on its interests. They cannot force another country to take the positions they want and must respect Honduras' stance.
The U.S. has long supported narco-traffickers in Honduras, most famously former President Juan Orlando Hernandez, who received unconditional U.S. backing during his rule, but was extradited in 2022 to the United States and in June of this year sentenced to 45 years by a U.S. court. In Texas, Governor Greg Abbott said Monday his state has removed more than 1 million people from the voter rolls since the 2020 election. About half of those people who've died or moved out of Texas. The remainder include hundreds of thousands who failed to update voter registration information after changing addresses. About 6,000 were stripped of their right to vote due to a felony conviction. Another 6,500 people were moved from the voter rolls after they were labeled non-citizens. A coalition of voting rights groups, including the Texas Civil Rights Project and the ACLU, warned in a letter to election officials, quote, Texas may be engaging anew in unlawful purges under the guise of list maintenance, unquote. The groups also say Republican elections officials purge voter rolls within 90 days of an election, a violation of federal law. And in labor news, unionized workers at Cornell University celebrated reaching a tentative agreement with the Ivy League school after less than 2 weeks on strike. The deal, which will benefit maintenance and dining room staff, gardeners and custodians, includes historic pay increases of up to 25%, cost of living adjustments, and ending a 2-tier wage system. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Mimi Goodman.
And I'm Nermeen Sheikh. Welcome to our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.